I'm Greg Giuliano. I'm an executive coach, organizational change consultant, and author. I believe leaders have the power to shape the future and change people's lives. I also believe people who challenge the status quo and go beyond usual and ordinary are rare. They're willing to go to the edge and push farther, over and over again. When I find these ultra leaders, I love to talk with them. In each episode, I talk with ultra leaders to learn how they do what they do and how they keep growing as leaders. I promise you a full dose of ultra leadership from other ultra leaders just like you in every conversation. We're at the edge of another episode. Let's jump in. Welcome to another episode of Ultra Leadership. I am pleased today to welcome my guest, Rocky Scales. Rocky is CEO at IDGO, the leader in providing no-code, low-code user authentication technology. Rocky has a successful track record as a leader in fast-growing technology companies. He likes leading at the edge. He was EVP of sales at RealWear, an augmented reality company, and at the fintech providers ShareID, OnDot Systems, and Vesta Corporation. Rocky did his undergraduate work at the University of San Diego. That's where I met him a long time ago. And he started his career at HP, and along the way, he also grabbed an MBA from Santa Clara University. He's a fantastic leader, an awesome husband and dad, an all-around good guy, and I am thrilled to welcome him to the program today. Hi, Rocky.
Hey, Greg. How are you?
I am great today, and this is for me, a fun conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. Every time I'm with you, I learn something. And so we're going to share your wisdom with folks today.
Well, thank you. And I'm happy to be here too, Greg.
Cool. I'm glad. So let's give everybody a win right out of the gate. I know that you are a lifelong learner. So what are you reading or listening to right now that you are recommending to people?
Well, absolutely a lifelong learner. I love audiobooks. I mean, it was a great innovation because one of the challenges I think with our careers is the time that we spend in the car. It can be one of the most unproductive times. In fact, it was that time that we got back during the pandemic. But being able to listen to audiobooks, being able to listen to podcasts during that period of time to fill that void, if you would, with some really quality input has been fantastic. When I took this position at IDGO, I had a really good friend of mine that recommended listening to Wisdom from the Top, which has been fantastic. The interviews with the CEOs on Wisdom from the Top, talking about their experiences with leadership, but also some challenging business environments and how they had to pivot their business, the investments that they made, the strategy changes that they made. It has been fascinating, really, really fascinating. Kind of another book, just, preparing people to be a leader and specifically to be a CEO is Lencioni's book, The Motive, which was excellent. Really enjoyed that. I commonly check in with Bill Gates's reading list. I plucked one off it recently called Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow. And I'm just embarking on that. And then on deck for me is a book that I just saw reviewed in the Wall Street Journal called Completely Mad, which is about a guy on a 20-foot boat crossing the Atlantic in the first part of the century in the 1900s. And at the same time, there was somebody in the U.S. crossing the Atlantic on a northern route. So it looks like it's going to be a very entertaining book. I'm looking forward to getting started on it.
Oh, right on. Thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah.
So you're getting all this wisdom from other CEOs. You're a CEO. And it's a very different role because you've got people who are working in the business on your behalf, but your job really is to work on the business and to create the conditions for all these other people to succeed. So tell me a little bit about what you think about that and what that looks like for you.
Yeah, for me, it always starts, Jack Welch was somebody who was an advocate for, having customer meetings frequently and, weekly having customer meetings. So for me, it starts with the customer. What are the problems that we're solving? What are the needs that they have that aren't being met today? But having that dialogue open with customers, understanding how customers are using your product and how it could improve, which really just feeds into the product roadmap, is foundational. Beyond that, there's certain things about the product. I mean, you have to validate that the product is a market fit. You have to make sure that the right kind of branding and demand generation tools are in place so that you can get awareness with your target audience, so that you can get some intent to buy with that target audience. And then ultimately, yes, you have to have especially in a B2B environment, you have to have a methodical and effective sales process. So those are just some foundational things. I mean, from the top, the fun thing is you get to influence all of those different attributes. Historically for me, whether I've been in a product role, I've been in an operation role, or a sales role, sales leadership role, I had a piece of that pie. And so for me, this is exceptionally fun to take all of my experience and kind of float it up to the top and be the one that gets to influence that strategy and provide the inspiration to the team to execute on it.
So before when you were talking about it being inspirational, hoping to be an inspirational leader, you talked about the importance of listening as a component of inspiring people. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that. That is fascinating.
Yeah. It's such an important skill, and something that I just didn't do enough of when I was young. And I don't know what it is about, if that was just me, or maybe a lot of people that they get out of school and they're so ambitious to start making a contribution that at some point I think we act first and listen later, and that's backward, right? I mean, that's one of the challenges, is that when you're listening, you're learning. I mean, there's a bunch of cliches that come about here. One of the books that kind of inspired me on my journey to listen better was Questions-Based Selling, which any good sales meeting, ought to start with a series of questions. Get your customer, get your prospect talking, get them talking, if it's appropriate, about them and their personal life first, but then their business ultimately. And everybody loves to talk about their business. Everybody loves to tell you, what's going well, what's not going well. And there's a ton that you can learn. And, if the last 10 or 15 minutes of that conversation is about, your product and your contribution, fine. Most likely you're going to get that second or that third meeting as a result of it. But you walked away with a bunch of knowledge because you asked good questions, you listened well. And so it's just hard to emphasize enough. I think that, even for young leaders, the importance of listening can be overlooked because, again, especially somebody that just is fresh out of MBA school, you think you have a lot of the answers, but you don't, right? I mean, you need to be patient, you need to listen, you need to ask questions, and that's the path to learning, constant learning.
And that's the way you can show that you care, right?
Yeah, great point. Yep. So whether it's customer or people on the team, you have to be empathetic, you have to be authentic. But if you're going to be able to inspire that team and lead them to some breakthrough initiatives on the business and to achieve or exceed goals for the business, making sure that they understand that their contribution, their ideas, their suggestions are being heard, that ultimately that strategy that's being defined, that journey that we're embarking on together, is something that they designed. I mean, without that starts to break. That team leadership, that inspiration to the team starts to break. So you have to have the team involved. You have to hear what they have to say. You've got to take the time to do that.
And you're describing a real overlap and intersect of the employee experience and the customer experience. And I think as I'm hearing you, the connective tissue there, the through line is the leader who's listening to both the customer, what's your experience, what can we do for you, and your employee, your people, and your teams. What's your experience, and what can we do for you?
Yeah, it's a common thread, right? It really is. And maybe that the point there is that everybody treats their customer with a tremendous amount of respect and admiration and recognition for what they're saying and their contribution. And that same approach needs to be applied to employees, right? You need to treat them virtually the same way, if not more important. These segments of people, customers and employees, are the pillars of a leadership that need to be managed appropriately to generate success for the enterprise.
So you've led lots of teams over the years because you're really, really old. I'm older.
Yeah,
I'm older.
Slightly, yes, slightly. Important to note that, yeah.
Yeah, no. So you've led a ton of teams, and so when you think about the challenges that they've, this has happened on every team. What were the things that would maybe for a minute keep you up at night? And and this is just a common problem with teams. And what's been your fix?
Really good question. So I think when you have distributed teams, things are just more challenged. And when you're higher up in the organization, sales leader that has, regional sales leaders beneath them and a global team, you're faced with some common obstacles, time zone differences, Asia to the US, Europe to the US, and then cultural differences, recognition about, how people feel comfortable talking about certain topics in Japan, versus France, for example. So with that, getting back to the point of making sure that, their voices are heard and that the appropriate cultural sensitivities are taken into account so that their voices can be heard and that they feel that they're part of the strategy that's moving that business forward, it just becomes more challenging. It's very difficult. And I've known this because I've spent a lot of evenings talking to the team in Asia and then the next morning talking to the team in Europe. And it's very time consuming. So for me, that's always been the biggest challenge is that the bigger the team and making sure that as a leader of that team, that I have the right kind of connectivity with really important contributors on the team has always been a challenge. And without that connectivity, then what happens is there's just some growing discourse amongst certain team members that speak to each other and speak to each other internationally and start raising doubts and uncertainties about the direction that the team is headed or the business is headed. And so there's these sidebar conversations, right, that don't get to you. And one of the things, I had some simple philosophies that I preached when I had larger teams. One of them was, I can't fix what I don't know. You've got to have the courage to call me. You've got to have the courage to send me a text. And, look, feedback's a gift. You've got to trust that when I say you're not going to be punished for this, you got to believe me and give me a chance. But literally, I can't fix what I don't know. And if you're getting frustrated, I don't know about it unless you tell me. And so inviting people in an environment and creating an environment where that invitation is received well and trusted to take action it's foundational to success with the larger teams.
Yeah, that kind of a culture, seeing things and saying what you need to say, speaking your truth,
Yep.
Right away, and let's fix it. Let's fix it together.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of gets to this other point that kind of goes in, similar themes of what we're talking about, which is, just courage and being bold. Back to the cultural sensitivities, being bold in some countries in Asia is not well received as it is, in some of our Western cultures. So I'd love to preach about the importance of being bold. I'd love to quote, fortune favors the bold. I mean, the people that are leading this world are the people that have courage, right? They showed up and took advantage of the fact that they were present. Usually they didn't get asked to participate, right? They took it on their own initiative. But getting people to buy into that can be a little bit difficult, right? And getting people to know that you're not going to be punished for being bold can be a little difficult.
Well, I would imagine they need to see it happen, that's right? That your response confirms for them. So it's one thing to hear about it, but once they see it once or twice, that you as the leader respond with openness and with curiosity to fix something with someone. Oh, okay, he meant it, right?
Yep.
It sends that message.
Yeah, that's
and
exactly
the converse
right.
can be true, right? So that's the power of being the CEO or a senior leader in an organization. People are watching you all the time, and words really don't matter. They're watching what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so if you practice what you preach and you recognize and you reward people for that desired behavior and that behavior about being bold and putting forth ideas in an environment where you're not going to be punished, you're going to be recognized. That can be a game-changing event. And tactically it can happen at all company meetings. It can certainly happen in department meetings. But once it does start happening and people in the company reference, employees reference other employees with the fact that I witnessed this, that's how you start changing the culture, right?
Yeah. So I love Marshall Goldsmith's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And one of the questions that I like to ask you to be a little bit vulnerable with us is, you mentioned earlier that when you were younger, maybe you didn't listen enough. Today, as you're the CEO of a company, what's something that you do that, oh, shoot, I have to pay attention to this because this is how I get in my own way?
Yeah, good question. My answer to that question today could be different than a year from now because, the size of the organization that is IDGO it's a startup that is, on the verge of blossoming. And so my focus today, kind of getting getting what I want. I mean, the most important thing I'm doing right now is reaching out to prospects and customers on behalf of the business, on behalf of the product. And that's where I'm listening the most. And that's where I'm taking the time to make sure that we understand where we make a great contribution today, where we can help illustrate and help them illustrate what that contribution is so that they can move the opportunity forward internally. And then what are the shortcomings of the product or the capabilities today? Where are there gaps in the solution so that we can fill those gaps? Because those gaps to me drive the product roadmap. Everything we do from a product development perspective needs to be focused on improving the product market fit, making customers happy, and ultimately delivering enhancements to our revenue. But it's a deep question that like I said, I think a year from now, I might have a different perspective on it.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I like to, in all my coaching conversations and when I'm working with teams, I like to bring things in for a landing with some reflection on gratitude. It's good for our brains, right? When we express gratitude, when we hear gratitude, when we receive gratitude, it pumps our brains full of the good neurotransmitters that make us feel better. So I'd love to hear from you. What are you grateful for today?
Yeah. As you go through your days, sometimes something catches your eye that makes you pause and think. And, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I had an event happen earlier this week. A friend of ours, and you know who I'm referring to, we won't mention any names, and they're brothers that we went to school with, but one of them passed away a number of years ago. The brother that is still with us had posted something on social media about the fact that he's missing his brother. And frankly, we all do. But it just kind of stopped you in your tracks and you reflected on a variety of things, what you are grateful for, your family, the opportunity that I have to lead this business and to grow this business. And of course, our friends, you included, Greg. I mean, it's so great that we still have each other after all this time. And it's important that we recognize how lucky we are about that. So I think that many of us don't stop enough and pay gratitude for what we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I am grateful for you. I'm grateful for all the years of laughing and sharing our lives with one another. I'm grateful for our conversation today. I learned some things. I got, check out some new podcasts, catch up with you on my reading list. And I'm really, really grateful for the time. I know that our listeners got something out of it. The one quote that I pulled today that I'm going to write it down and I'm going to share it with everybody. And I will quote you was when you said, "We act first and listen later." That's backwards.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That is like, boom, right between the eyes. Yeah,
and I can tell you I had to learn it. My motive just naturally was to take action on things. And, I had consecutive years in performance reviews. You had mentioned Hewlett-Packard, where, that was like the first thing that the coaching feedback that they gave me was, generally you're going in the right direction, Rocky, but you've left the team back here.
Yeah.
So, it's
go back and get them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there's no autopilot. You got to make sure they're always there.
Yep, exactly right. So
I love it.
Anyways, I enjoyed the conversation too, Greg. Can't wait to see you again.
All right, man. You take care. And thanks to everybody for listening. This has been another episode of Ultra Leadership. We will see you next time. If you're enjoying Ultra Leadership, please take a minute and give us a review wherever you find your podcasts. And please stay in touch. Sign up for our Ultra Leadership newsletter at ultraleadership.com. Now, before you jump to your next meeting, I invite you to reflect on what you heard today. What stood out for you? What insight might you want to incorporate into your leadership practice? Until next time, remember, as a leader, you always have the power to shape the future and change lives. So go to the edge and push farther. Thanks for listening.
This is the podcastfactory.com.